If I had my way, everything would be so nice. This world would be like Paris. No, it would be a paradise. No one would ever have to say, I'm going to get my wish someday. All one would have to do is say, this is my order, if you may.
Welcome to another episode of The School Without Walls. I am Anthony O. Hobbs, host of this educational program. We are designed to do whatever we can to encourage the African American community to be involved as mentors, especially for the African American young people. And we want to empower the African American community educationally, economically, and spiritually. I have a community activist with me today as my guest, Brother Jihad Muhammad.
Yes.
He's involved and he's a mentor and so forth and so on. So what I want you to do, Brother Muhammad, is just tell the community a little bit about your background. I understand you somewhere along the way you got off base, if you will, and
Yes.
got in prison.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
start
sir.
at the beginning. Were you born here?
Yes, sir. I was actually born here in Pine Bluff and grew up here.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere down the line, my mother and my father wasn't getting along too well, so they separated when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And a year later, my father wound up getting killed by the person that he had married after him and my mother separated. And it was at that point that my whole concept and my whole ideal about trust, my whole ideal about loyalty changed. And so that very year, my family, in terms of my brothers, I had 3 older brothers and an older sister. I was the baby. And my whole family went off track. My oldest brother got involved in stealing. He wound up going to jail and prison that very year. My next to the oldest brother got involved in gang banging and actually wound up going to reform school. So from that point there, the point of my father being killed.
You were 7 years old?
8, actually 8.
8 years old?
Yes, sir. So my whole family took a nosedive, even my mother, because in order to deal with that pain, she went out sometimes at night and to these bingo halls, of course, and played bingo. And so that gave me and my brother and my sister time to kind of get into mischief while she was gone. So that was probably the initial starting point of me getting off track and getting into trouble because, I being young, followed my brother's lead. They was running around Pine Bluff claiming to be gangster disciples, skipping school. So at the age of 3, I started skipping school and stealing and doing things that definitely was going to lead me eventually to
What
prison.
age was that you started skipping? You said 3.
I guess it was about. I guess I was about 8 years old, 8 or 9.
Right, about 8.
Between 8 or 9.
Right, you
Yes, sir.
started skipping school. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And continue. You grew up.
So from that point on, I eventually wound up getting kicked out of school backwards and forth. When I was in the 5th grade, I was going to 3rd or 4th, and one of the principals told me I was an animal and I should be locked in a cage. And shortly after that, I wound up getting into a fight at the school, and the teacher came and grabbed me, and out of anger, I pushed her. And I eventually wound up, from that incident, being sentenced to Department of Youth Service.
That's
Actually,
5th grade.
Yes, sir. Going to the Alexander Youth Service Center. Because, of course, at that time, I was too young to come here to Pine Bluff. They had older children here at Pine Bluff. And so after I got out, my great-grandfather, who was real dear to me, he passed, and my aunts, uncles, they were down from California. So they actually took me because I just got out of reform school. I seemed to be the sensible one. They actually took me to California. I stayed there for a few months and eventually came back. Well, one of the things during the whole time, from the time my father died up until the time I came back from California, every one of my family members, somebody always missing because they was incarcerated, big brother in prison. And so when I got back to Arkansas, I was in a rush to get back to Arkansas because my oldest brother had actually got out of prison. My brother, who was in reform school, who eventually went to Job Corps, he was back. So now the whole family was back here in Pine Bluff, and I was the only element missing.
Okay.
So I came back to Pine Bluff. And of course, my brother had did time in prison, and he was not in a state of mind to come out, be productive, and stay out. And so we continued, the whole family continued to go down here.
How old was your brother at that time?
He was probably about.
Was a teenager?
No, he was about 20 at the time,
Okay.
maybe 20, 21.
Okay.
He was grown at the time. He stayed in prison for several years and got out. And so at that time, that's the time when he started toting guns. My older brother started toting guns. They put their age up to 18, the ones that wasn't, and was working at the pork, so they actually got a check, and they was able to, you know, buy beer and stuff on Friday. And so the family continued to go downhill. My oldest brother wound up going back to prison when we moved back here to what is called the backwoods or the north side. And my mother came up with the idea that, you know, all of my children have went to prison except my youngest son and my only daughter. So she took us, we packed up and moved to a small town called Crawfordville with family members, with some people that she actually grew up with. And that didn't do any good. I got kicked out for the rest of the year there, put my age up to 18, and I started working at the Carson Rice Mill. And there, well, in that little country town was where I actually started running with people, toting guns, drinking more, etc.
Okay. We have about a minute to go to break, so when we come back, we will continue with Mr. Jihad Muhammad in his life story. And we're hoping that in this storytelling, it will prevent some young person
Yes, sir.
from
Indeed.
going astray. Be back in just a few minutes.